Amazon will be the most valuable company in the world within 24 months, if not 12. Anywhere Amazon competes, if I was going to write a sequel to the 4, it would be called the 1, and it would be about Amazon. Show me chaos, show me a lack of faith in institutions, and I'll show you Bitcoin at $20,000. If the White House takes on big tech, it's McGregor-Mayweather Part 2, and the redhead gets the shit kicked out of him.
Hi, I'm Nick Kolos from Data Trek Research right here in New York City, and we're doing a video today with Real Vision with Professor Scott Galloway of NYU Stern. And he's got a bunch of really great topics to discuss, including why big tech should get broken up, as well as his perspectives on valuation for everything from Amazon and Apple to Facebook and even some Chinese tech companies. So Scott, you've got a picture that you show, I think the first day of class, is it?
Yep.
To every student that's ever been through your class.
Yep.
What does that picture look like, and how does it inform your thinking about technology generally?
Sure. So it's tech in the torso, and the belief or the thesis is that the only way you can scale a company to hundreds of millions of users and hundreds of billions in enterprise value is to directly speak to an instinct that regardless of our subscriptions to the New York Times or graduate degrees, we're animals, and to really build a big business, you have to know exactly what instinct you're going after. So in order, Google is God and appeals to our need for a super being. Our competitive advantage as a species is our brain is so large that we have to literally be expelled from the body prematurely. And the brain is robust enough to ask very complicated questions, but not robust enough to answer them, creating a void of 3,500 super beings all competing to kind of be your favorite God, if you will. Unfortunately, as we get more educated, or fortunately, and more affluent as a society, our reliance on a super being and church attendance declines dramatically. But our questions keep getting more and more unanswerable, if you will, which creates a void for more of an information age super being. And anybody who has kids has prayed, will my kid be all right? That's a pretty common query. And what is a prayer but a query into the universe, hoping there's some sort of divine intervention that processes the query, that sees everything, and then can return an answer that you trust more than any answer you would get from any priest, rabbi, scholar, mentor, or boss. That is Google. Will my kid be all right? Symptoms and treatment of croup. If you don't believe Google is your God, think of your name and your face above everything you have put in that dialog box, and you'll soon realize that you trust Google more than any other entity. It knows if you're about to get engaged, it knows if you're about to get divorced, it knows your diseases. It knows what diseases you're worried about having been exposed to. So Google is our God. Moving further down the torso, one of the nice things about our species is that we not only need to be loved, kids with poor affection and good nutrition don't have as good outcomes as kids with good affection and poor nutrition. We need to love others. The fastest growing demographic group in America, centenarians, we're all going to have someone in our family who's 100 years of age. And the 3 signals of the likelihood of you making it to 100 are in reverse order. Number 3, genetics. It's not as important as we'd like to think. Number 2 is lifestyle. In sum, don't smoke, don't be obese, and you avoid a lot of early carcinogenic and cardiovascular events. But the number 1 signal, whether you're going to make it to 100, is how many people in your life do you love? Caretakers, literally the physical and mental strain and nuance of caretaking releases a hormone that clears out the bad cholesterol, and people who are taking care of others get to stick around, which makes sense because those people are the most important to the species. Moving further down the torso, so Facebook is love, and I think it foots to our need to want to love others and catalyze and strengthen first and second order degree relationships, mostly with images and pictures that create empathy. Moving further down the torso, I think Amazon is our consumptive gut. It is drilled into us more. Again, since we emerged from caves, the number 1 source of death across our species has been starvation. So it is drilled into us more. Open your cupboards, open your closets. You have between 10 and 100x more than you need. And is immediately washed over by the instinct of, yeah, but I'd still like more. The penalty for too much is diabetes, lethargy, gluttony, but all these things have huge lags. And that penalty is a fraction of the penalty for too little, which is starvation. So the economy that offers more for less is usually the fastest growing economy. That's China. And the company that offers more for less or does the best job of more for less is usually the most valuable company in the world. In the 90s, it was Walmart. Now the company that from a perceptual standpoint offers the most for less is Amazon, which will soon be the most valuable company. Moving to our final spot in the torso, the reproductive organs, we constantly make irrational decisions. Irrational in the business world means large margins. A lot of irrational decisions with our reproductive organs. This has resulted in a series of products in a category that has grown more shareholder value over the last 30 years than even tech on a risk-adjusted basis, and that is luxury, where we signal to other people that we have good genes. That I have high cheekbones with Estee Lauder products, which means I'm less prone to infection, that I drive a canary yellow Ferrari, meaning I'm strong like bull and have good DNA. These things have built more wealth, more billionaires on the Forbes 400 list, if you take out inherited wealth and finance, than in tech are from luxury. Wealthiest man in Europe, Bernard Arnault, numbers 2 and 3, the signs of Inditex, Zara, and H&M. Apple, the iPhone, is now the easiest way to signal to people that you have good genes. You can afford a $268 product but pay $1,100 for it. You live in a city, you're part of the creative class. This is the easiest way to say to someone, mate with me. Just as paying for dinner with a Discover card or having ad-supported Pandora or an Android phone says, do not have sex with me, Apple says, I would be a good mate. These 4 companies, appealing to these instincts, have added the GDP of India to their market capitalization since the Great Recession. The brain, the heart, the gut, and the genitals.
If we Google your name, the #1 video that comes up, and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, are all versions of the same message from you, which is it's time to break up big tech.
Yep.
It's a very controversial point of view because these are companies at the top of the food chain. So walk us through how you got to that conclusion, because obviously you looked at this for a long time.
Sure. So wrote a book, spent 2 years kind of marinating in these companies and reading about them and trying to understand them. And for the last 10 years, worked with these companies. They're my clients, or at least a couple of them are, and work in the ecosystem with some of the biggest companies in the world who are trying to figure out how to compete in a digital age. And the book really started as a love letter. I think they're incredible. By the way, I owe these companies a lot. They're the number-1 recruiter. Amazon's the #1 recruiter of kids in my class at Stern. More people will go to Amazon than any other firm that recruits at Stern. They saved my ass economically. In 2008, I got run over by a truck economically and took what little dry powder I had, and I bought 2 stocks, Amazon and Apple. And it's kind of restored economic stability to my household. So I love these companies. I love the products. I'm a customer. I have no intention of giving them up. But I think there's a natural part in the economic cycle where through incredible execution, a lot of luck, access to cheap capital, we end up in a situation where one company has so much power that smaller companies have trouble getting out of the crib and competing, and bigger companies are euthanized prematurely. And I think we're at that point. And we tend to look at it through the lens of, well, one, is that a socialist or a European thing? There's sort of this macho test. I remember feeling reticent. I kind of knew that I felt that they'd gotten too powerful and should be broken up. But I found myself checking those emotions at the door because I like to think of myself as a dude and likes competition, and I'm an entrepreneur, and I like the full body contact sport of business. But part of the natural economic cycle, whether it was the railroads or Ma Bell, is occasionally you break a company up and you oxygenate the marketplace. And the object of every innovator's affection, Google, would not be here if the DOJ hadn't moved in on Microsoft in '99 and said, stop putting small companies out of business like Netscape. We'd be all saying, well, let's bang it, right? So this is a natural part of the economic cycle. They haven't done anything wrong either. These are for-profit companies. Their job is to grow their earnings, grow their top line, and create economic value and security for the families of their shareholders and their employees. And they're doing that in spades. And every quarter, that is their sole mission. Regardless of their claims to do no evil or connect the earth, they're there to grow earnings, full stop. So we have gotten to a point where we have Google at 92% market share. 2 companies, Facebook and Google duopoly, own 2/3 of all digital marketing, probably the most robust business in the world. Amazon is pre-installed into 62% of US households and 80% of wealthy households. No cable company, no utility company has more than 15 or 20%. And then there's Apple, which is the most profitable company in history. So I don't think they've done anything wrong. I don't think they're evil. I don't think there's anything socialist or European. I think a key component of our society and our economic cycle is to break companies up when they get too powerful. That's part of capitalism. You know, the worst system of its kind, except for all the rest, is that we need competitive markets. And I think the markets are failing. I think there's examples everywhere, whether it's Amazon that can take the stock of any company down 30% in 30 days with 30 press releases, whether it's this idolatry of these companies where they get the mother of all hall passes, where Starbucks has an unfortunate incident at one of their stores and decides they're going to close the store down for a day on May 29th for training. Our democracy has potentially been subterfuged or weaponized by Facebook. At the end of the day, what have they really done? And we accept it. And how many advertisers have they lost? They have 5 million advertisers. Playboy and Pep Boys have head to the door. Oh well, right? A conservative commentator on Fox mocks a 17-year-old, which is terrible, and she loses a third of her advertisers. Because advertisers on TV have a lot of choices, but advertisers in digital have 2 choices. And there are a lot of very patriotic, civic-minded people who are advertisers who would like an option, but they don't have anyone. On top of the funnel, it's Facebook. Bottom of the funnel, it's Google. So in sum, you know, sure they avoid taxes, but we all avoid taxes. They're job destroyers, but we need job destroyers. They're not evil. They're no less or more evil than any other company. We break them up because we're capitalists, and it's time. We are at that point in the economic cycle.
So let's drill down a little bit on that. How would you break up a Facebook or
Sure.
a Google? What do the individual components look like in that schema?
Facebook, I think, is pretty easy. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. And just to give you an example, I think a lot of these problems, I think regulation tends to be ham-handed and expensive and creates kind of permanent government jobs. So I'm not actually in favor of regulation other than some basic laws, and they should probably be regulated as media companies, meaning they can be sued for the content on their platforms. But I think the answer, the most effective, efficient way to kind of unlock more value would be to break them up. Similar with Ma Bell, what we found is when we broke them up, there was a lot of innovation, including cellular technology, fiber optics in Bell Labs that hadn't been unleashed because they didn't want to compete with their monopoly business. So I think breaking these guys up, probably Facebook into 4 companies, would create a lot of interesting innovation and opportunities. For example, I think one of them would say, how do we compete with the other 3 guys? I know, let's go to P&G, let's go to Unilever, both huge companies, very civic-minded, and say, you know what we've done? We're taking a bunch of our free cash flow, and we will guarantee you that our platform will not be weaponized by bad actors. I think that would be very appealing to advertisers. I think one or more of them would say, you know what, we have a CEO who can actually be fired. I think that's attractive to investors. I think that's attractive to employees. Castro took over Cuba when he was 33 and oversaw an island nation of 11 million people, and we were all freaked out. And he was arguably the most powerful man in the world because he lasted a half a century, right? Just outliving people is a pretty good strategy if you're allowed. So who's the most powerful person in the world? A lot of people say it's Putin. He'll probably be dead or lose his faculties in 15, 20 years max. We are cursed for a max with Trump for another 6.5 years. Mark Zuckerberg could oversee a community larger than Christianity, 2.1 billion people, for the next 70 years. And he can't be removed from office. In addition, getting into the head of this man, this is a guy that a year ago proposed a 3rd class of shares such that he could sell his entire economic stake, have nothing at risk in Facebook, and still control a population greater than the size of the Southern Hemisphere plus India. What could go wrong? We need to break Facebook up into 4 companies, more competition, more hiring, more venture capital, more options in terms of advertisers, less weaponization, less bullshit delay and obfuscation when senators get mad at them who clearly don't understand technology, and they can just say, we're sorry, or Senator, this is a serious issue, and then go on to say nothing. Breaking these guys up would create more, in my opinion, more civic responsibility, be better for the Commonwealth, better for our tax base, better for hiring, better for the planet.
So 2-part question after that. So it sounds like you feel that breaking the company up would actually create some shareholder value if a shareholder got those 4 companies in their portfolio instead of just one. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I want to be clear. I don't think there's ever a quote-unquote free lunch. I think in the short term, these companies might lose, their stock prices might go down. But I think you might be able to have your cake and eat it too here. Look at Amazon and AWS. I'm not sure that if AWS is spun from Amazon, that the 2 independent companies aren't in aggregate worth more than the company is now. So, when eBay spun PayPal, it was incredibly accretive to shareholder value. So I don't entirely acknowledge right away that you would be economically ruined. It would be economically ruinous for the shareholders. But again, having said that, I don't know if there's a free lunch here. I can see the stocks going down in the short run.
Okay. So let's take that one level further.
Sure.
I'm really intrigued by the idea because the question that pops up in my mind is what U.S. companies will compete with Chinese tech companies like Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu that have an entirely different relationship with their government than these companies do with us and our government. And it seems that if we break those companies up, they're not going to have the firepower to build the AI, the self-driving cars, other technologies. So who's going to step in the void, and how do we avoid just losing out entirely to Chinese tech?
So that's a very compelling argument. We need big football players to compete against their big linemen, right? So the first response is that the right premise? Would Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger in aggregate be better competitors and scarier against Chinese companies than one? And if you look at innovation coming out of China, we in the U.S. tend to be very narcissistic. We think that basically all innovation kind of stems from the epicenter of the world, and that's SFO International Airport. If you look at each of the platforms in China, in terms of product rollout, in terms of innovation, their companies are actually more innovative. And so I'm not sure I entirely buy the premise that these companies as individual speedboats wouldn't be more nimble and more powerful competitors than kind of big companies. Now, but let's for a moment assume they are. What you have in China is a little bit of a glimpse into the future, in that what happens when governments let companies kind of grow unfettered. And you end up with very valuable companies. The question is it good for the ecosystem? And a lot of people would argue it is, because there's more now venture capital investment in China. I would argue that over the long term, a group of small companies that control so much wealth and influence, it ends up having a lot of negative impacts. So just as an example, I don't think there's any way you can ignore the decline in the growth of middle-class wages and the rise of big tech. When you have one company with 24,000 employees with a $600 billion market cap, Facebook, and then you have the old economic titans of yesterday would employ 100,000 to 250,000 people and have $100 billion market caps. You have this kind of winner-take-all economy. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's just a natural part of the evolution of our economy. And I would argue, no, the world isn't what the world is. The world is what we make of it. And we've decided to let these companies aggregate so much wealth across a small number of people that it's great if you own real estate in San Francisco. It's great if you own the Ferrari dealership in Portola Valley. But it's not great for the middle class, and it's not great for our society. China is a totally different animal because there's so many more, just the ecosystem is so much different, the distribution of wealth is so much different. But the question is, all right, if China is the model, that's who we're competing against. Name a great global Chinese brand. So they have 3 companies now in the top 10 in terms of market cap. They're comfortable with natural or unnatural monopolies. But long term, what Chinese brand? Name a global Chinese brand. Can you name one?
Huawei.
Huawei? Okay, do you really think that's a global brand? Do any of your teenage kids know what Huawei is?
No.
Do you use Huawei in your life in any way?
But I would say, look at the other side. If we had asked the same question about a Japanese company in 1960, I think we would have gotten the same response.
We might get there, 100%.
We ignored the Japanese threat, particularly in the auto industry, because of exactly this logic, and we really paid for it.
It's a great point. We didn't have the Sonys yet. We didn't have the Hondas. We didn't have the Toyotas. It doesn't appear so far that the Chinese have been able to take on any of our guys. I'm not sure. We talk about them because they're large market cap, and the Chinese have been, quite frankly, smarter than, I would argue, a lot of Western nations who openly and freely trade with big tech. So here's the Chinese model. Come in just long enough for us to steal your IP, and then we prop up a local entrepreneur and we capture the value domestically. We call it IP theft, they call it innovation. We did the same thing in the 19th or the 18th century with British and Irish textiles. If you want to grow your GDP faster than 5 or 6% a year, your core competence of a nation has to be theft. And right now, I would say that China is moving from a theft-driven GDP economy to an innovation-based economy. But make no mistake about it, Google coming long enough, P&G coming long enough to educate mothers not to let their kids pee in the streets. The diapers make sense, that they're a signal of upper middle class and affluence, and then boom, send in the local guy. And that's what they did with Google. And by the way, are they the dumb ones? Who's dumb? There's the Western way. Italy went the Western way. Let Google compete. We're macho. Let them compete. Western trade laws. What's happened to their ad agencies? What's happened to their newspapers? What's happened to their tax base? What's happened to their job base? Then look at China with Baidu. And by the way, how many Chinese platforms have been weaponized by a foreign adversary? Now, you could argue they've been weaponized by their own government, but they haven't been weaponized by the foreign intelligence unit of another nation.
But if there's no democracy, there's no need to weaponize it.
Fair enough. I'm not saying it's the right system. I'm saying economically, I think what you're I'm not even gonna make a value judgment. I'll just make a prediction. A European nation or a Latin American nation is gonna go Chinese. And they're gonna say, we're Uruguay. And we've seen what letting Google and Facebook into our ecosystem has done for our media environment. Maybe we'll just come up with something that looks very similar to Google and prop up a local entrepreneur and capture the value themselves. We're going Chinese. Because to date, I think if you look at the Western nations that have adopted these technologies and let these companies come in unfettered, yeah, their consumers can search in 0.0055 seconds. They're connected to their friends in Europe. But has it been good for their societies? Because at the end of the day, these four companies have been the most efficient, fastest vessels in the world of the transfer of wealth from the rest of the world to the US, and then from the middle of the US to the coasts. So Charles Schumer or Dianne Feinstein aren't going to go after these companies, right? But I do think you might see a smaller Western nation say, like I said, we're going Chinese. But your original question around, would these companies be less able to compete with these Chinese behemoths? I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't say that a group of smaller companies, all well capitalized. Keep in mind, Instagram on its own is probably worth $150 billion, so they wouldn't want for capital to compete. Some people would argue that the focus and not being in a corporate structure might make them more nimble. A lot of the companies that have been broken up have gone on. I mean, when Telco was broken up, it unleashed unbelievable shareholder value. It wasn't like, China Cell or Deutsche Telekom immediately seized the US market because there was no longer one big competitor. So I think it's a decent argument. I think it's worth exploring by people who have a much stronger background in antitrust and game theory. But I don't entirely buy the premise that it would immediately indicate that we wouldn't be as competitive.
Okay. Thinking through how the trajectory of the pressure to break up tech might shape up, particularly over the balance of the year.
Yep.
We obviously had a huge catalyst with the Zuckerberg testimony a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
But what do you see for the rest of the year? What headlines, perhaps, that investors aren't thinking about, you think are likely to happen?
Well, just as we don't know who the Democratic nominee for president is going to be, we just don't know who's going to pop up. We don't know where. I'm pretty sure regulation or trust busting is going to show up, but it's not going to be from where we think it's going to be. The only thing that the hearings with Zuckerberg really solidified is that DC doesn't have the collective will or IQ to take on big tech. 4% of our elected representatives have a background in technology or engineering. That ignorance was on full display. Even the format. Let's give everyone 5 minutes. So Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, who are very smart, immediately registered the flaw in the glitch in the matrix and said, oh, they're idiots. They're giving everyone 5 minutes. So nod your head, respond thoughtfully and nod and say, Senator, this is a serious problem. Repeat the question. Pick one of 15 talking points. If the second question is difficult, then say, Senator, and look around thoughtfully and say, this is such an important question. I'm going to have my team get back to you. 4, 3, 2, 1, gavel, next question. They employed the oldest strategy in the world of sports, burn the clock. Right. And they did it over and over and over across 5 minutes. You would think that our elected representatives would be adult enough to get into a room and somebody, maybe, I don't know, the Speaker of the House would say, or the head of the Judiciary Committee, who here, raise your hand if you understand technology? 1 or 2 hands would have gone up. And they would say, I know. Why don't we let you, Bob, and you, Lisa, maybe have 6 or 7 minutes instead of having Orrin Hatch, who questions the sustainability of Facebook, saying, how do you survive when you don't charge for your business? I mean, clearly this guy had no idea what was going on. Or Senator Nelson, my senator from Florida, who was just fascinated by the notion that if he says he likes chocolate, he gets chocolate ads. Who would have thunk it, right? So the notion that it's going to come out of DC is ridiculous. Who in the administration out of the White House can take on big tech? What was interesting with Donald Trump's comments just a few weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, against Amazon, and Bezos, and the Post, is that he unwittingly immunized Amazon from regulation.
How's that?
It came across as a partisan hack attack. It was ill-informed. Immediately started with, Amazon doesn't pay its fair share of taxes, true, but then went on to say they don't pay any state taxes. Not true. They pay state taxes. They don't pay any corporate income tax because they run their business at break even. So since the Great Recession, Walmart has paid $64 billion in corporate income tax. Amazon has paid $1.4, despite the fact that Amazon has been adding the value of Walmart to its market cap about every 18 months for the last 3 years. So it came across as ill-informed. It came across as partisan, which it is. So immediately, some very powerful senators on the left who were starting to make noises about Amazon's growing influence have all of a sudden gone dark. So he literally alienated his allies and has immunized his company. And then what did Bezos do, or what did Amazon do? Start feeding the media facts about everywhere he got it wrong. So in this war between DC and big tech so far that's shaping up between Trump and Bezos, one of them is acting presidential, one of them is president. He has literally immunized Amazon unwittingly. In addition, you're going to have the first pitch of the Washington Nationals season 2019 be thrown out by Jeff Bezos. They're going to headquarter in DC because this will serve as a prophylactic for regulation. No one wants to regulate the local guy. He's going to be playing golf and mahjong with senators and congresspeople, and he's going to light DC on fire. There's going to be no momentum to go after him. So if DC or the White House, if the White House takes on big tech, it's McGregor-Mayweather Part 2, and the redhead gets the shit kicked out of him. This is not going to come from DC. Where it's going to come from is one of two places. Brussels, Marguerite Vestager is going gangster on these guys, and you can understand why. They register all of the downside of big tech. Weaponization of their elections, or platforms that undermine their elections, job destruction, tax avoidance, anti-competitive behavior, but they register a fraction of the upside. We register a ton of benefit here. They do create a lot of high-paying jobs. They're the object of our affection, national pride. They build these ecosystems. Net, we're having an important conversation around the downsides, but net in the U.S., we're winners from big tech. In Europe, all the downside, fraction of the upside. There are very few hospital wings and university buildings in Europe named after Google or Facebook billionaires. So this is stiff in the backbone of EU regulators. You're about to see Europe go get, like all the major conflicts of the 20th century, the war against big tech is breaking out in continental Europe. The other non-zero probability of someone who might go after big tech is a red state attorney general who says, all right, Missouri and Kansas, we have very powerful phones, we have this great search engine, but it hasn't been good for our economy. Is Google hiring a lot of people out of the University of Missouri? How are our ad agencies doing? How's our tax base doing? And I think you might see a red state AG say, look, the fastest blue line path between the Attorney General's house and the governor's mansion is to make a populist argument against big tech and go after them. And if it resonates, a bunch of other AGs will pile on in some sort of class action suit. Basically a redo of what happened in big tobacco. So you could see that. So a red state AG or Brussels, DC, it's over, it's done. Facebook 1, DC 0.
You know, one reason I watch all your videos and read everything you write is because you come across with these observations that at first blush seem way out there, like breaking up big tech. Yeah. But you have a really good track record of making predictions that actually work out. I want to start on that vein with probably your most famous, most topical one, which was Whole Foods and Amazon. Yep. Can you walk us through how you got there? Because you were out there a week before I think that acquisition was announced with Kara Swisher talking about that exact transaction, and it came to pass. So can you kind of unravel how you got there?
Yeah, so it was 50% luck, 50% timing, and the rest was talent and insight. I just got really lucky. But it makes sense looking back at it because the only way, let's start. What's Amazon's strategy? Amazon's strategy is to own all of your retail. They're not going after, I mean, you could argue they're going after the niche, which is wealth. They're going after kind of the top median of households, or the top half. But they're primarily trying to cover all of your basic retail needs, or most of them. You can't, and key to intensity across the prime relationship, which is sort of their key, if you will, tactical strategy, is prime, is intensity. Now, what do we mean by intensity? It's affection and it's fluidity. So if I can offer you great programs, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, or things that, or Transparent, that create intensity and affection for Amazon, that's key. So we'll spend $4.5 billion on original content. But I have to be selling you stuff, not once a month, not once a week, but 2-3 times a week. And the mother of all consumer categories, the largest consumer category in the world, is grocery. You can't have an intense retail relationship with someone. It's like the way to, my grandmother used to say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. The way to a consumer's heart is through their stomach. It's food. Grocery is the largest consumer category in the world, U.S. grocery. It's a $700 billion market. You can't be in someone's house 2-3 times a week unless you're in grocery. So Amazon had to be in grocery. In addition, they're going after wealthy households. With Amazon, you get 550 well-lit, well-staffed warehouses/distribution centers in the wealthiest zip codes in America. And just as 9 women can't have a baby in a month, Amazon, even with all their capital, wasn't going to be able to build out DCs in Manhattan, in Costa Mesa, right? I'm trying to think of wealthy, in Buckhead, Atlanta, I'm trying to think of wealthy areas. Also, the growth in groceries in the long tail. The CPG, actually, people are spending more money on food categories, but the top 100 brands in CPG and food, 90 of the 100 have lost share. And it's because, 90 of the 100 have lost revenue, 2/3 have lost share. It's because we used to want Dannon yogurt, then we wanted Chobani, now we want some kefir curdled thing that we saw Beyonce likes out of some place in Brooklyn. The long tail has all the growth. So warehouses, grocery, incredible distribution among the wealthy, the long tail, all for what was going to be a 2% dilution. Boom, it would be stupid not to acquire this company. So this one just made a ton of sense. And then the luck part was I happened to be in the media, spouting off the week before, and then a week later they announced it. So that was just a lot of luck.
No, but it helps really frame the discussion about how you come to the conclusions. What I'd love to do now is talk about some of your 2018 predictions,
Sure.
A lot of which are already beginning to work. So I also want to get a sense how much more is there left in the story.
Yep.
So let's start with one that really speaks to me, Amazon versus Apple, a very simple comparison.
Sure.
Which one should have the bigger market cap?
Yeah. Well,
you argue Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon will be the most valuable company in the world within 24 months, if not 12. Anywhere Amazon competes, if I was going to write a sequel to The 4, it would be called The 1, and it would be about Amazon. Look at where Amazon butts up against the other 4. In search, which is an incredible business, and Google it continues to own it, but there's a niche of search that is really powerful, product search. Understanding or being able to bid on keywords from people looking for a car or a watch is a great keyword and gets a lot of revenue. Amazon is now #1 in product search and has been for a while and is actually growing pretty fast. So Amazon is building this incredible search business. Their media group, while small, only $4 or $5 billion, is now growing faster than Facebook or Google. So in media, you would argue where they bump up against Facebook or Google, they're actually doing as well or better than they've done in a while. Where they bump up against Apple in hardware. Most innovative hardware company in the world? Okay, still Apple. Most innovative hardware products of 17 and 18 or 16? Was it the watch? Was it the iPods? No, it was Alexa. By far the most disruptive product in our economy since the iPhone. Who is that? It's Amazon. Well, let's talk about streaming video and streaming media. Well, that's Apple, right? That's iTunes. Actually, Amazon went from #7 of share of primetime streaming to #3 in 1 year, and is now the second largest spender on original television content. In offline retail, right? Amazon, we know, is the dominant force in online retail. 45% of the most valuable channel in the world, Amazon, 45%. A third of the fastest growing, most profitable sector in technology in the world, cloud. Oh, Amazon. Offline retail, who's the #1 share there, grower there? No, it's not Walmart. It's now Amazon with Whole Foods. So you look at this company, and they are firing on all 12,000 cylinders. And then, long term, they have the ultimate gangster strategy in that the market doesn't seem to want or need them to be profitable, meaning they have a cost of capital no one else can match. At the end of World War II, the Germans had better soldiers, better morale, better tanks, better machine guns. But the Allies had cut off their supply routes, and we had 38 gallons of gasoline for every one they had. So we would take our inferior Bradley tanks and zip around one Panzer until it ran out of gas, and then go start banging on the thing with a hammer until it became unbearable for the people, and then they come up and kill them or take them prisoner. Amazon is the company that shows up with 38 gallons of gasoline. If I said to my clients who I work with, Fortune 500 companies, you can work at break even for the next 20 years and your stock will go up, they could be remarkably innovative. So the number one core competence of the most valuable company, soon to be most valuable company in the world, is storytelling, which has created this unbelievable vision and this romanticism and this fanaticism around the company that has meant they have 100 or 105 cents on the dollar to everyone else's 90, 80, or 70 when they invest. Amazon is going to blow past Apple. Apple, an unbelievable company, will be for a long time. But Apple's been hovering around $900 billion. When Amazon was at $200 billion, I said it was going to be the first trillion-dollar company. It's now at $650. It has to go another 50%. Everyone looks at the metrics. The key metrics around Amazon or most stocks is EBITDA, growth. There is no EBITDA, then growth. It's not. It's competitive advantage. And when Amazon starts going from $1,300 and $1,500 per prime household and using things like Ring and Alexa, and starts going to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per household with artificial intelligence, the market's going to go crazy and take this thing over $1 trillion. So yeah, most valuable company in the world within 24 months is Amazon.
Perfect. Next one, which again already has started to work, Facebook. Yeah. You said Facebook stock would peak. We saw a peak around about $190 a share in January before all the troubles broke down.
Yep.
How do you feel about Facebook now?
Yep.
More trouble to come?
I actually think Facebook right now in the short and medium term is a buy. So the prediction was that Facebook stock would peak due to multiple contraction as the specter of regulation would enter. And I think we got that right, or it looks like we got it right. It hasn't performed as well as some of the other guys. But if you look at the stock relative to its underlying business, and this is what I wasn't expecting, people are outraged by what's going on. And where do they go to express their outrage? Facebook and Instagram. 5 million advertisers, 7 have left. There's the business, every single signal I see is that the business has never been stronger. Meanwhile, the other guys are going up 20, 30, 40, Netflix up 60, 80%, Amazon up 40, 50%. Facebook has taken a breather because everyone believes all this huffing and puffing is going to have an impact. All the scrutiny, all the anger is people stamping their legs on cement floors. A little bit of sound, no movement. The stock is a buy in the short or the medium term. Long term, I'd like to think, and this might be idealistic, that tone-deaf management that has really poor judgment in my view. They might be geniuses, but shows a total lack of leadership. I'd like to think that comes back to haunt you. Also, in terms of how robust a business it is, 95% of their business comes from top of the funnel advertising, amazing brands and apps, but probably a less robust business than the other guys. You could argue all the other guys have businesses. They're somewhat separate from it. YouTube is a search engine, but it is a little bit different than Google, this core search engine. Apple probably has 3 or 4 public companies. Amazon has totally non-related businesses, making it very robust. Facebook doesn't seem as diversified and has a 33-year-old who, in my mind, makes an African dictator looks thoughtful in terms of his view of the world, his view of what it means to have responsibility and power. I think this 2-class shareholder system is a terrible idea. And I think most recently, with both he and Cheryl retreating to the caves of Kandahar in the face of crisis, outs them as being really weak leaders.
Disney, what you call the fifth horseman.
Yeah.
Explain what that means and what it means for the value of the stock.
So I'm not supposed to make stock predictions, so I say the fifth horseman is basically my covert way of making a stock pick for the year.
Sure.
January 1, 2017, I said the fifth horseman was going to be Netflix. I saw it as the operating system for the second most valuable screen in the world, which is our television.
That was a great call.
Yeah, I got, again, very lucky, but it's skyrocketed, right?
Yeah.
So January 1, they asked, what's the fifth horseman? And I think that the marketplace is ready for kind of a gangster move by an old economy company. I think the only company capable of a fat bundle right now in terms of media is Disney. And with their acquisition of some of the Fox assets, they're the only old economy company that could go up against Netflix and Amazon and offer an ad-free bundle of sports, kids content. You're a member, let's call it Disney Prime or Disneyflix. You get access to our cruises, our theme parks on non-busy days. You get Star Wars 7 days before anyone else in your home. I think Disney, you get commercial-free Disney and Pixar kids content. I think Disney's the only company that could be a viable alternative to Amazon Video, or more importantly, Netflix, and create the kind of the mother of all recurring revenue Prime-like relationships. Now, they would have to pull an Adobe move and take their revenues and profits down, but I think Bob Iger is one of the few people who has the credibility to do that. What I'd love to see is if the Time Warner AT&T merger gets called off, which it won't, but if it was, to get Jeffrey Bewkes and Robert Iger in the same room and get Disney and Time Warner assets to create the ultimate bundle. I think that would be really exciting and a lot of fun. But Disney on its own, I think Disney is well positioned to do really well.
Yeah, it's amazing because Netflix is about $140 billion market cap. Disney's about $150 billion market cap.
Yeah.
So if what you say comes together, there is a lot of potential energy in that stock that can be unleashed, right?
Yeah, and just for your viewers, before they start thinking I'm some sort of Nostradamus in terms of stock, I bought Netflix at $80 a share. It dropped to 70. I sold it. It then split 7 for 1, and I think it's gone up 30 or 40 fold since then. So I get it wrong all the time around stocks.
Maybe you're just a little impatient.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Let's talk about Twitter and Snap, because you've got some pretty interesting thoughts there.
Yeah. So I do think again, going back to the Zuckerberg two-class shareholder stock, I've been very critical of Twitter. I think a part-time CEO is ridiculous. I think it's almost impossible to keep talented people when you say to them at the end of the day that this guy at 30 hours a week is more talented than you at 60 hours a week, and you've seen just a hemorrhaging of talent there. Twitter has become more and more relevant. They have become such a part of the national vocabulary. I can't think of very many brands that have a banner across almost every TV program, every news program. They pop up the Twitter logo. Donald Trump, the president, has made Twitter much more relevant. The issue for Twitter is, does Twitter become like the New York Times or the BBC or PBS, and that it's a hugely relevant organization that never creates a lot of shareholder value? So it's an incredible vehicle. I use Twitter more than any other social media platform. More and more relevance, poor corporate governance, shareholder returns that have been okay the last year, but weak the 3 years before that. It smells like an acquisition to me. It feels like it's going to dip to 25 and then get bought for $40. Snap, in my opinion, is the Walking Dead. I know kids love it, and again, this goes to the power or the abuse of monopolies. One company owns the 4 most trafficked or used apps in the world, that's Facebook, and they have all in a coordinated attack turned their guns on number 5, Snap. We were all hoping Snap would be the Facebook of video. We need a third player. The Facebook of video is Facebook, specifically Instagram stories. So I think you're going to see the oxygen start to suck out of the room for Snap. There's a lot of players, whether it's Google or someone else, that would love to own Snap, and I think it'll be acquired.
Who's the ideal buyer of these assets? Who could make the most of them, particularly in your framework of big tech getting too big? Who's the right, not just the highest paying buyer, who's the right buyer?
Well, I think Google's probably the right guy for both of them, whether that just creates more problems. So this isn't an argument around what should happen, it's an argument around what I think will happen. I think these guys are both going to get taken off the table. Yeah.
So you also had a lot of really interesting thoughts about cryptocurrencies and their effect on financial services.
Yep.
So let's do the financial services side first. You said that it could take as much as a third of value out of very large, well-known financial services companies, and it could happen fairly in the near term. Can you walk us through that thinking?
Sure. I don't know if it'll take a third of the revenue. I don't know if crypto to me is beginning to feel a lot like an incredibly hyped technology that's going to let a lot of people down. It has all the makings of, for lack of a better term, a bubble. But there will be a lot of innovation and interesting announcements around crypto technology over the next 12 months, because so much venture, so much human and financial capital are being poured into try and figure out really cool things to do with the blockchain, right? So the basic narrative is Bitcoin is speculative, ICOs are fraud, but the underlying innovation is blockchain. And every VC that wants, or company, corporate VC unit that wants to invest in this stuff is investing in the blockchain. So you're going to see a lot of interesting, cool technologies that threaten ledger-based businesses. I spend what feels like a half an hour a day approving wires because fraud has gotten so bad. And supposedly the blockchain is going to do away with a lot of that. So even if one of these companies manages to get just 10 basis points of share in the wire industry, or in the money transfer business overseas, or a credit card fee transaction, or whatever it is blockchain's going after, the market is going to get very excited about crypto and blockchain and companies, and very upset about traditional financial services. So a lot of times the disruption is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Amazon acquires Whole Foods, and the stock of Kroger, the largest pure play competitor, declines a third between the time they announce the acquisition and when they close it, because Amazon is buying a company 1/11th the size of Kroger. It would be impossible for you, as a Kroger consumer, to know that Amazon had acquired Whole Foods. It didn't change the business at Kroger, but the perception of the oncoming disruption took the stock down a third. So will crypto and blockchain technologies damage or hurt the financial services industry on a tangible business level? I don't know. Will they create a lot of havoc? Let's say the Americans in Southeast Asia, are we going to win the war? No, but we're going to drop a lot of napalm. Blockchain is going to drop a lot of napalm on the financial services industry and damage it, regardless of whether they win or not.
Now tie that into perhaps where you see Bitcoin going, because one of your predictions was Bitcoin was going to drop 50%.
Yeah.
Check the box, that worked out great,
Yep.
as you said it would. If you had to do a prediction now for the next 12 months,
Yep.
what's your thinking?
So I made two predictions. One was that it would drop 50%, and that happened within 3 weeks. But the other prediction, which is a little scarier, as I said, it would also go past $20,000. Because at the end of the day, and by the way, blockchain, I don't claim to understand it. I'm still trying to figure out Ripple. I'm still trying to understand these coins. As far as I can tell, I think Bitcoin is a proxy for chaos. And that is, as young people lose confidence in our institutions, that bubbles up to the loss of confidence in the Federal Reserve, and the ultimate signal of trust in our economies is our currency. The dollar, at the end of the day, is an indication of trust in our system, or the value we put in what is a fiat currency, right? So when people start to lose faith in their institutions, I think they turn to this non-institution-backed, non-Federal Reserve-linked, non-sovereign-linked currency that is Bitcoin. So on the evening we were about to seat, or came within 30,000 votes of seating in the Senate a pedophile, Bitcoin started to rally, and then when it became clear he was going to lose, Bitcoin dropped in price. So show me chaos, show me a lack of faith in institutions, and I'll show you Bitcoin at $20,000. So my prediction around Bitcoin going to $20,000 is that at some point over the next 12 months, young people are again going to see actions on behalf of our leaders that create a tremendous lack of confidence in our institutions, and Bitcoin will skyrocket again and hit 20,000. So I got it half right. We'll see about whether it hits 20,000 this year or not.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time
Hey,
today.
thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did, because I thought the professor's comments about everything from breaking up big cap tech to the direction of Apple and Amazon and Facebook over the next year, and particularly that discussion of Bitcoin at the end, discussing where it might go and what might drive that particular asset, was fascinating. Hope you enjoyed it. This is Nick Colas for Real Vision.